Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. I'm in a secret secondary studio today, but nonetheless, we're going to have a great show. What is Pope Francis actually working on from his hospital bed, even though we get day after day of these vague updates about his health from the Vatican? He slept well. Well, I'm glad. Praise be to God. He should sleep well. But what is his prognosis? Is he going to recover? Give us some sense of it. We don't continue to get that. We've been talking about that all week long. But today on the program, Dr. Anthony Stine is going to be on the show at 30 past the hour. He's covered something on his channel today that I think is very insightful and interesting, and that is, what is the Pope actually working on? Because we are being told that he does read documents. He's now had visitors from the governing body of the Vatican City State. So what is he working on exactly? What's on the agenda when you're in the hospital and you are in critical condition with some kidney issues and somewhat frail? Well, we're going to have that conversation at 30 past, because is he working on things that might set up the next conclave? I think that's one of the questions people are asking. I also kind of want to dispel some rumors in addition to that, because there's lots of people who are saying, oh, the Swiss Guard, they are preparing for the funeral. Are they? Is that true? I don't know. I'm going to get Dr. Anthony Stine on the team to talk about that. And if we have time, we may even weigh into the potential contenders for the next conclave, because now more and more people are actually talking about the next contenders. I mean, it's not just Catholics. It's not just trad Catholics or any of that. Even Robert Royal is weighing in on the next contenders for the chair of St. Peter. So we're going to have that conversation today. Also, I want to share with you a brilliant little article over at the American Spectator by Sam McCarthy. Marriage is the antidote to societal decay. As marriage goes, so goes the family. As goes the family, so goes the world. It's a great article. I'm going to link to this and everything else in our show notes for you today over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We've got a lot to get to today. Let's pray. Let's jump in. Do us a favor and share us with a friend. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Porphyrius of Gaza, pray for us. Porphyrius was born in Thessalonica to a wealthy Macedonian noble family around the year 350. At the age of 25, he renounced the things of the world and left for Egypt, where he lived in a monastery for 5 years. Porphyrius then departed on pilgrimage to the Holy Land and decided to live as a hermit near the River Jordan, which he did for another 5 years. A serious illness nearly killed him, and he moved to Jerusalem to be near the site of the resurrection. It was here that Porphyrius met his disciple and hagiographer Mark, a future deacon, who helped Porphyrius sell his remaining property in Thessalonica and distribute the earnings to the poor. When Porphyrius recovered his health, he was made a priest and entrusted with guarding a relic of the Holy Cross, though he considered himself unworthy of these honors. Even more reluctantly, Porphyrius soon became Bishop of Gaza, in which role he labored long and hard to convert the pagan inhabitants of the city and destroy their idols. By the time he died, on February 26th in the year of our Lord 420, not a single professed pagan remained in his see. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Saint Porphyrius of Gaza, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Catholic News Agency reports Pope Francis fills number 2 position of the governorate of the Vatican city-state, all from the hospital. Pope Francis has named 2 secretaries general to serve under Sister Raffaella Petrini in the governorate of the Vatican city-state, giving the Vatican's first woman president, quote, the power to dispose and confer specific competencies or particular tasks on the appointees. The Vatican announced yesterday that Francis had appointed Archbishop Emilio Napa and layman Giuseppe Puglisi Alabrandi to serve as joint secretaries general of the governing body of the Vatican city-state. The Daily Wire is reporting nearly 100 illegals captured in Colony Ridge deportation raids, just down the street from where I'm sitting right now, actually. Nearly 100 illegal aliens were captured in the joint deportation operation from the Department of Homeland Security and the Texas Department of Public Safety inside Colony Ridge, the massive Texas development that was exposed as a magnet for illegal aliens. Border Czar Tom Homan described Monday's actions as phase 1 of a larger criminal investigation. And Ground News is reporting Supreme Court throws out Oklahoma death row inmate's conviction. The Supreme Court overturned the conviction and death sentence of Richard Glossip due to prosecutorial misconduct that affected his 2004 trial. Justice Sonia Sotomayor emphasized that the prosecution allowed false testimony to go uncorrected during the trial, undermining Glossip's case. The court's 5-3 ruling sends Glossip's case back for a new trial, marking a victory for death penalty reform. And we'll see where that goes. Those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 9, verses 38 through 40. John said to Jesus, "Teacher, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to prevent him because he does not follow us." Jesus replied, "Do not prevent him. There is no one who performs a mighty deed in my name who can at the same time speak ill of me. For whoever is not against us is for us." The Gospel of the Lord. Laus tibi Christi. St. Augustine would say, "Forbid him not, for they ought to have forbidden his being without their society, and thus to have persuaded him of the unity of the church. But they should not have forbidden that in which he was with them, that is, his condemnation of the name, of the commendation of the name of their Lord and Master by the expulsion of devils. Thus, the Church Catholic does not disapprove in heretics the sacraments, which are common, but she blames their division or some opinion of their adverse to peace and to truth, for in this they are against us." Orthodoxy? Anyone? Do you catch the subtlety here, the nuance involved in this argument? Because I'm sure there are many people who would refer to this passage from Mark chapter 9 to think about how, Protestants are okay and Orthodox are okay. And see, he says, don't forbid them. Well, St. Augustine, writing back in, the 4th century, early 5th century, is making a clear distinction here. There is only but one bread, one body, one loaf. There is only one church. But there are subtleties and nuances here. They do not forbid the heretics the sacraments that they can rightfully perform, but they call them to church unity, Cornelius a Lapide would say, "Do not hinder him in a good work, and one that honors me, because even if he does not follow me, yet he is doing the self-same thing which you do. That is to say, he is celebrating my name, and he is making it known to men by casting out devils. Wherefore he does nothing that is against my name, but rather propagates and glorifies it." Doing good works, that's different than pretending to be church, I would argue. "This man, therefore, is not your adversary," he goes on to say, "in that he does the same that you do. He stands on your side. He helps you. He does not oppose you. This is Christ's further reason to show why the man must not be forbidden to cast out devils. It is as though Christ said, quote, "If he who gives you a drink of water in my name and for my sake does well, and shall receive a reward from God, so likewise shall he who drives out devils in my name. For both the one and the other do a good work, and are profitable to their neighbors in regard and respect of me. But the one confers so much the greater benefit than the other, by as much as the devil whom he drives out is more hurtful than the thirst which the other alleviates by draught of water." Close quote, quoting from Theophilus there. Father McKeevely would say this is generally assigned as a third reason to prove they should not prohibit him to expel demons. For if the man who gives a cup of cold water in the name of Christ, who gives it to his followers because they belong to Christ out of the love for Christ, shall not lose his reward, be it temporal or eternal, according as he may be capable of meriting it, how much more shall this man be entitled to a reward who does what is still more charitable, incurring the afflicted, and does so in the name of Christ, thus advancing his glory. The reward, in case the man who does the good work have not faith, could not be eternal. You still have to have faith. You still have to pursue the unity of the one body of Christ. As Saint Ignatius of Antioch would say in 110, the Catholic Church, for where the bishop is, there is the fullness, the wholeness, the completeness, the universalness of the church. He used the word Catholic to describe that church in 110 AD. Let us pursue the unity of Holy Mother Church for the glory of God and for the salvation of souls. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. More to come.
Did you know you can help evangelize simply by using your cell phone? The Station of the Cross is partnering with iCatholic Mobile, America's only Catholic mobile phone company. When you join iCatholic Mobile, a portion of every dollar will support our programming. Plus, you'll enjoy great service with iCatholic Unlimited 5G data, text, and talk. With iCatholic Mobile, you can stay connected with family and friends while also spreading the truth of Jesus Christ with clarity and charity. Join today at iCatholicMobile.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Looking forward to being back in my regular studio tomorrow. But coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation about Pope Francis, not just his health updates, because they remain the same vagueness coming out of the Vatican. He had a restful night, which we are glad to hear, by the way. We are glad to hear he had a restful night. Praise be to God. But I think there's a bigger question, and that is, what is he working on? Dr. Anthony Stine has been covering this, digging into exactly what is the work. When they tell us, well, he did a little bit of work, he had some visitors come by. Well, who were they? What is he working on? I mean, he's a frail man. He's in a critical condition, as the Vatican clearly states, with some kidney failure. Should he be working or focusing on just getting better? Well, he had some visitors. What does that mean? And I think that's very telling, because more and more people are actually talking about a conclave. And I think that's interesting. So we're going to have that conversation. We might even dispel a few myths surrounding rumors that are flying about his health. Like, for instance, did the Swiss Guard actually practice for a funeral? Some are saying so. But even Robert Royal is weighing in on a new conclave over at the Catholic thing. So Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition is going to be on at 30 past the hour to talk about that. Again, we're going to link to everything in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that one of my hot button issues is marriage. And in fact, I've even gone on the record to say that if I ever got the call from the White House press secretary, Miss Leavitt, to come and sit in the room and ask a question, what would I ask? Well, one of the questions I think that I really, really, really want to ask is whether or not Donald Trump will, in fact, support marriage between a man and a woman. He's been very quiet on this issue. He's not said anything about, pursuing the overturning of Obergefell and bringing back marriage between one man, one woman in our country. If we want to make America great again, then I would argue that we need to make marriage great again. There's an article over at the American Spectator. I'm going to link to it for you. Spectator.org is the website. The headline is "Marriage is the Antidote to Societal Decay. As goes the marriage, so goes the family. As goes the family, so goes the world." Sam McCarthy was not able to join us today to talk about it, but I want to read this. It's short and sweet and to the point. It's very good. And I think it illustrates the issues that we're dealing with in our country. He says the American family is failing. It isn't difficult to understand why, though it may not be popular to discuss. The family, as the basic unit of society, is fundamentally rooted in or founded upon the institution of marriage. But this institution has become diluted and degraded over the years, yielding disastrous results. I'm going to argue right out of the gate before I continue that IVF is the fruit of a destruction of marriage. When you destroy the marriage between a man and a woman, the foundation upon which human life is not only conceived, but raised, fostered, mentored, prepared for adulthood, and to contribute back to society, then you are going to get evil things like contraception, abortion, and in vitro fertilization. It goes on. Social media influencer Ashley St. Clair recently announced that she and tech billionaire Elon Musk have a 5-month-old child together, although the two are not married, which, again, pausing, by the way, the Cardinal in San Francisco has, or the Archbishop in San Francisco, Corleone, has publicly called for them to marry, just so you know, to make it right. It goes on. Musk has over a dozen children with at least 4 different women. Let me repeat that. Elon Musk has over a dozen children with at least 4 different women. While it is commendable that Musk promotes raising birth rates and is frequently photographed carrying his children at Mar-a-Lago or the White House, the tech scion has not built a family. A family requires a mother and a father, a husband and a wife. In 2024, over 47% of households in the United States were led by married couples. While this is marginally higher than the all-time low of 2022, when 46.8% of households were led by married couples, it is a far cry from the high of 1949, when nearly 79% of U.S. households were led by a married couple. Divorce rates, of course, are a factor, but divorce rates have reached a record low, a 50-year low. Isn't that interesting? So fewer homes have mom, dad in the house raising the kids. And now the divorce rate is lower than an all-time high. Why is that? Well, it goes on. The issue is that the marriage rate has also hit a 50-year low. In 1970, just over 75 women per 1,000 unmarried women got married. That's a gobbledygook number, in my opinion. Confuses me. Let me just clarify. So very few women are getting married at all. They're not even bothering to get married at this point. They're just shacking up. Not just women, it's men too. That figure has been declining, the article says, ever since, bottoming out at 28 marriages per 1,000 married women in 2021 and rising to just over 30 as the end of 2022. In other words, fewer and fewer couples are getting married. This happens to coincide with a trend of sexlessness among young Americans. Now, I'll say this. For years, I have been looking at the statistical data that the Carey Institute holds for the USCCB on the church. And I'm not sure if you can still get access to it. It used to be that you can go to the website, you can actually see the data itself. And I used to always download it, bring it into spreadsheets, and run some numbers. And it was clear. I mean, the parishes were declining, religious communities were declining, priestly vocations were declining. So were baptismal sacraments. They weren't baptizing their kids anymore, and they weren't getting sacramentally married anymore. They were all on a huge, huge decline. They are shacking up. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons was because, my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, we grew up in broken families. It became very, very common in my generation for my peers to see their families break up. Mom, dad get divorced and be split up and have to be raised and, bouncing back between mom and dad. And it became total chaos. And so my generation decided, you know what, we're going to just do that less. We're just not going to get married at all. And then that got passed on to the next generations. And so now they just don't want to have to worry about divorce anymore. So instead of worrying about it, they just simply shack up and they come and they go. It goes on, though. Over the past decade, a growing number of American adults aged 22 to 34 are simply not having monogamous sex. According to the Institute for Family Studies, the case is not that a small number of men are having sex with more and more women, but simply that men and women are failing to couple off together. The major decline is in sex between people who only have sex with one person in the prior year. In other words, monogamous sex. The decline in marriages, the decline in married couples, leading families, and even the decline in sex is symptomatic of a spiritual cancer eroding the very foundation of society. The great Dominican philosopher and theologian St. Thomas Aquinas once explained that the opposite of love is not hate, it is use. Where love is the complete giving of oneself to the beloved, a willing surrender of oneself, and a desire to achieve the good of the beloved, use is the inverse. Using another person is a consuming, not a giving. It is not a willing surrender, but often a forceful possession. It does not consider the good of the other, only the appetites of the self. The debilitating, widespread, and liberal approach to pornography, contraception, and abortion have all contributed to the development of this culture of use. Each of these evils enables and encourages the individual not only to make himself and not the family for the essential unit of society, but accelerates the degradation of relationship and ultimately isolates the individual in a hubristic state where he alone is God, and all others are not persons, but are mere tools or instruments of his pleasure. I have to say, this is very, very true. I, as I've said many times, was raised on pornography, addicted to pornography, and I had a mystical encounter in 2002 that saved my marriage. It was an incredible experience. I've shared it a number of times. But a number of times I've also said this, and if you've never been addicted to pornography, this is going to sound very strange to you. But the brain, addicted to pornography, does not think straight. It does not think correctly. It does not think clearly. The pornified brain sees other people, frankly sees the entire world as existing for my personal gratification. And therefore, it becomes easier for the brain to rationalize the abuse of another person because it's just going to serve your own self-gratifying needs. The brain cannot see human dignity clearly and correctly when you are addicted to porn, addicted to self. The good news is the brain can be healed. The brain science, the brain is very plastic. It can heal, but it takes time. You have to cleanse yourself. Dare I say, you have to kill the demons in your life. You must kill them. You can't allow them to hang out in the background and the shadows. You must utterly destroy them. You must cut off all access to the near occasion of sin. You must make the decision that this far and no further. On this hill I shall die has to become your motto, because if it doesn't, you will just simply wait one moment after another moment until you fall again. And eventually, after perseverance and fortitude, after determination to go to battle, to war for your soul, day after day after day, saying, I will not serve the devil, the demon, the world, the flesh. No, sir. No, thank you. I will serve God. and I will remain pure and chaste. And only then will you get to enjoy the beautiful benefits of living with a clear mind when your brain heals. But until then, you will see the world through this perverse, disgusting lens, and you will rationalize things like abortion, things like IVF, things like contraception, things like homosexual lifestyles. You will rationalize like, oh, well, it's okay. I'm not, who am I to judge? The brain must be clear to see the world clearly. And if we are truly going to make our country great again, if we want to make the world great again, holy again, if we want to bring back Christendom, then you have to defend marriage between a man and a woman, the very design by which God has given to mankind to not just bring about unity between spouses, but the very foundation upon which to bring life into this world and to make them into adults that will also see clearly and also stand their ground against the world, the flesh, and the devil. When we continue to allow the destruction of marriage, we don't hold it up as the divinely instituted foundation upon which all societies are built, then we will never make America, let alone the world, Christendom again. We must defend it. And furthermore, we must call on Donald Trump and our politicians to defend it and to overturn Obergefell and to make marriage between a man and a woman the rule of law again in our country. Great article from Sam McCarthy. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Coming up after the break, Dr. Anthony Stine joins us. Don't go anywhere. More is coming. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The Hill is reporting Southwest plane and jet have a near miss in Chicago. Yet another aviation incident. A Southwest Airlines plane flying from Omaha to Chicago and a taxiing private jet had a near miss moment at Chicago's Midway International Airport yesterday. The crew of the Southwest Airlines Flight 2504 initiated a go-around when a business jet entered the runway without authorization at Chicago Midway Airport. The FAA said it is investigating the incident. Just the News reports Trump education nominee Linda McMahon backs plan to abolish department. President Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, has confirmed her full support for the president's plan to abolish the department. The nominee issued the statement in response to questions from Senators Elizabeth Warren and Andy Kim. McMahon has already cleared the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Her nomination now goes to the Senate for a full vote, and she is expected to clear that final hurdle. And Catholic Vote reports government data says illegal border crossings reach 15-year low. Boy, it's been a while since we've heard those numbers, huh? According to federal government statistics, the number of migrants that authorities encountered at the U.S.-Mexico border have reached a low just 2 weeks into Trump's second term. On February the 22nd, just a few days ago, encounters fell to just 200, the lowest single-day total in over 15 years. Remember, it was just a couple of months ago we were hearing about ultimate highs. Now we're going the other way. Very interesting. Those are your headline news. The Vatican has come out and given us another update. They give us updates every day as His Holiness Pope Francis remains in the hospital. They say he remains in critical condition, but he had a restful night. And sometimes we are told that he's doing some work. He's reading some papers. And now he has visitors there at the hospital from the government of the Vatican city-state. And the question, I think, is what exactly is His Holiness working on? Dr. Anthony Stine at Return to Tradition has weighed into this today. He's looked into it, and I think it's very fascinating. He joins us this morning to talk about it. Dr. Stine, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, praise be to God. All right, so one, they remain ambiguous. They still don't tell us. There's no prognosis. There's no, hey, he's improving. We're going to get him through this. He'll be back at the Vatican. Nothing like that. There's no hope for the future. They don't give us any hope for the future on that. It just remains second by second. That's very troubling in my opinion. But number two, the work he's actually doing. Not too many people have been asking, well, what is he actually working on? And what does that tell us? But you've looked into it. What did you find?
Well, first, the They say his prognosis is guarded. One of my viewers this morning who's in Italy says in Italian, that's an Italian sort of medical way of saying very not good. So,
Wow.
Remember, there's always like a language barrier there. But when it comes to the things he's doing, he's announced a consistory. No date yet for that. But a consistory is wild to be announcing in February when he had one in December.
Especially from a hospital bed.
This gives me nightmare images in my mind. That would be utterly demoralizing for Catholics. But a consistory is for a number of things. And on the surface, this is for the saints that he's announced. He's announced a new canonization or two recently, some blesseds and those sort of things. A consistory is also where you make cardinals. And this is where I start to get like nightmare images in my mind of the Holy Father in a gurney holding this meeting with all the cardinals, because a consistory involves all the cardinals being in one place. That's kind of a red flag for me, because it sounds almost like he's summoning the cardinals to Rome. And at this time, that's not the best thing, or it implies something else may happen. He's also remade, essentially, or is filling in a bunch of vacancies for the bishops of Brazil, which is an odd thing to be doing if you're on your deathbed. You know, auxiliary bishops, archbishops, I mean, the whole nine yards. Because the bishops' conference of Brazil is a hot mess. They've got all sorts of scandals plaguing them right now, and so he's putting in new bishops there. He's appointed as you covered earlier. Initially, this was announced like a month or two ago that he was putting a woman in charge of as president of the Vatican, a Vatican City state, but that was confirmed while he was in the hospital. But the other one that I found fascinating, he met with the Cardinal Secretary of State and the Assistant Secretary of State for Vatican City. That cardinal is Pietro Parolin, who, despite being the Cardinal Secretary of State and having been knee-deep in the China deal, is often listed as near the top of the list of the Papabile. Some observers say because of the China deal, he shouldn't have a chance. But have you ever noticed that not too many cardinals speak out against the China deal? Very few people do. Cardinal Zen speaks out against it. A few others, but they don't speak out against it. That's telling.
Right. Especially
when the number we got from a Chinese whistleblower a few years ago was that the Vatican was paid several $1 billion a year by China for that deal. So these are the things Francis is working on, meeting with the Cardinal Secretary of State. Do you know what the Cardinal Secretary of State does during a conclave during the election process of a pope?
What's that?
He runs the whole thing. He runs the conclave. He doesn't get to vote himself, but he runs the conclave. And I have this wild conspiracy theory that Cardinal Pietro Parolin, being as papabile as he is, would potentially resign being the Cardinal Secretary of State upon the death of the Roman Pontiff, if that happened. And then his assistant would become the acting Secretary of State.
Now, would he do that? If he retires, then he can vote then? Or if he steps down, if he resigns from that position, then he becomes a voting member of the College of Cardinals.
And the man who is his assistant is the one who runs the conclave. Now, just start reading between the lines of some of that. And we're talking about someone who is charitably described by people more moderate than I as being if you are really wanting an iron-fisted version of successor to Pope Francis who would keep the program going, you're looking at Cardinal Pietro Parolin.
Which is fascinating. Wasn't he struggling with cancer himself?
Possibly, but Francis himself had a history of health problems before he was elected Pope. That doesn't seem to stop anybody.
And do we know the age of Cardinal Parolin?
I'm not saying Parolin is a favorite to be Pope, but he is higher on that list than a lot of people tend to recognize.
Do we know how old Parolin is?
No, but I can look that up really quick for you.
There is a list over at the, I'm going to link to it, by the way. There's a list of potential candidates over at the College of Cardinals report.com. I'll put a link to it in the show notes today. And let me just read off these.
Just turned 70.
70. Okay, 70.
Just turned 70.
There's a list here. I do want to get into this because I find this fascinating because so many people are now talking, not to be morbid. I mean, there's no gloating here about Francis being in the hospital. And there's no desire on my part, and I'm sure on Dr. Stein's part, to wish ill will to Francis in his current circumstances. Instead, we pray for him and for his soul, especially if he's preparing to die. That's the most important time for us to pray for him. But let me just read these names for you. Cardinal Peter Erdo is on the list. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi. Cardinal Robert Sarra. Cardinal Tagli out of the Philippines. Cardinal Ranjith. I'm not sure how to say that correctly. Cardinal Parolin, of course. Cardinal Pizzaballa is on this list. Cardinal Mbongo Bezungu. That's the guy who went to Rome to correct the Fiducia Supplicans document according to the African bishop's desire. That was very interesting. Cardinal Eck
but
is
he's
on
also
this.
Cardinal, the African cardinal you mentioned is also one of the ones who wants the Vatican to revisit the subject of polyamory and not in a way.
Oh, yeah. We'll get back to that. Yeah, I just want to let me just read these names. I'm not suggesting it's great. I'm just saying. Cardinal Eck is on the list. Cardinal Anders Abrolius is on this list from Sweden. Cardinal Bo is on the list from Myanmar, and Cardinal Aveline from France is on this list. Notice who's not on the list is Cardinal Fernandez. He's definitely not on this list. Or Burke. Well, I never thought Burke was going to be on the list. Or Zen.
I don't think so either. Well, I had a different list I went over, and you showed it on screen at the beginning of your broadcast.
Info
some of the names on that list are fascinating too, because I'm one of the few out there suggesting that people need to keep an eye on Cardinal Hollerich, and not because I think he's going to be Pope, but because what the scholars always talk about when it comes to how someone is viewed as being papabile, it has to do with governance experience and their connection to the cardinals and a lot of other things. But Cardinal Hollerich actually checks a lot of those lists because he was like the co-relator meaning he helped run the Synod on Synodality, which lasted for like 4 years. It lasted longer than the Second Vatican Council. Wow. He was one of the two faces of the church on the issue of synodality, which is way more popular among the cardinals than we like to admit, meaning he had more face time with more cardinals than a lot of others did. And when it comes to those social issues, he's pretty progressive, which tends to play well among them.
Big time. I saw some posts. I saw some posts this morning on social media about some of these guys that are big into the synodal way, and they seem to be very concerned that if Francis should pass, that whoever gets the chair next is not going to be on the synodal way, and they're very concerned that things are going to turn backwards on them. And they've had so much progress, is the way they see it, in their agenda, that they're afraid that they're not going to see it through to its completion. Could that be motivating some of the decisions that Pope Francis has to make now from the bed in a critical condition? I mean, I would say if he has a chance at recovery, his doctor needs to tell him, no, you cannot work. You need to focus on recovery. You're in a critical condition, Your Holiness. You have kidneys that might fail on you, and who knows where that might go. So we're just going to focus on recovery. No guests for you, no visitors, no work, just focus and rest. But that's not what they're doing. It seems like this is a tell.
The thing I tell people to watch for, if he is really believing he has very limited time left, and 72 hours is kind of the medical speak apparently for you have short term amount of time left,
limited,
where 6 months left to live is kind of medium term time. The thing to watch for is if a motu proprio or two start getting signed, because those are of a much more binding authority. And there's been one floating in the ether in terms of rumors for the last year or so that there's something about conclaves in the works. And the one is essentially that would ban anybody Francis has punished for schismatic attitudes, think Burke, from participating in a conclave. Now that thing would go off with like the force of your weapon if it did, because there's the other thing that I always warn people. Like I get questions from people. Do you think Francis is even alive still? And everything we're hearing is just manipulation. You cannot, those in Rome who would have the vested interest who might be manipulating Francis into doing things, or who, if he's not with us anymore, we're actually pretending he's still around. They couldn't risk doing something like that, because what would happen if the Cardinals figured this out right before a conclave?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Game over.
Which
over.
Reminds me, because we're going to be at a break here. I want to pick this up on the other side of the break, because there are other rumors. For instance, yesterday, someone floated the idea that the Vatican apartment had been sealed yesterday. And then, of course, there are several outlets. One even included a report out of Crisis Magazine that the Swiss Guard had rehearsed a funeral. I think the Vatican has denied that, but I want to kind of get into some of those reports on the other side of the break as we continue to pray for Pope Francis and his health. But I think it's very telling what actual work he's doing while also being in critical condition. Seems like it's a big priority to me. Like, you just got to get it done. So what does that tell us? Are we expecting another conclave? In which case, I believe transparency should be the rule, because the lay faithful, the body of Christ, should pray for Francis to prepare well for death, specifically with that intention, not just general default prayers, but specifically praying for that he would make a good and holy death. And number two, praying for whoever becomes Pope next. We should have the intention and getting about the business of praying for those intentions. And of course, we're seeing rosary rallies going on in St. Peter's Square, led by some of these potential contenders. I want to get into that as well on the other side of the break with Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition. A lot more is headed your way. Don't go anywhere. Share this with a friend. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and it's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, we're having a conversation not just about His Holiness's recovery or health or whatever his situation is. I'd love to tell you for sure what it is, but unfortunately the Vatican isn't giving us a whole lot to go on. They're keeping it guarded, as they've been reporting. But nonetheless, we can't help it, because everyone's starting to talk about a potential conclave and potential contenders for the chair of St. Peter. Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition is on our team today, and we've been talking about his look into what the work has been from His Holiness's hospital bed, having visitors come by, doing certain things that seem very intentional and seem to be setting up what might happen next. And if you're in critical condition, potentially your life is on the line, you're stable but in critical condition, should you be working or focusing on your recovery? That's been my argument. The fact that you're doing anything means you're doing the most important things you can think of because you think they have to get done. I believe that's a tell. And so we're having that conversation. Dr. Stine, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let me ask you about some of the myths and misconceptions. The Swiss Guard practicing a funeral. Several outlets reported that. The Vatican denied that, didn't they?
They did deny that, and looming over this, and I mentioned this yesterday, is you have such competing narratives coming out about what's going on that somebody has to be lying, that there has to be somebody lying in this, because the hospitals are saying he's fine. Although you'll notice they went from saying critical but slightly improving daily to critical but now stable, which who knows what that means.
Right.
To you have that, and then you have the leaks coming out, the 72 hours left kind of thing. So somebody's lying. And I will remind people, lying is a grave sin. It is. And I would hope that no Vatican official would be lying about his condition. But they have denied that they were practicing for a funeral. But something else is weird that's been happening. And on the surface, it seems completely natural what you would do. And that's what makes this kind of weird. And it's they have been doing rosary vigils every night in Rome. You've seen these starting a couple of nights ago. It was Cardinal Pietro Parolin leading it. And then last night it was Cardinal Tagle leading it. Those are your two Pape Bile, Francis allies leading this. Tonight it's being led by somebody who is not considered Pape Bile, Cardinal Ray.
Interesting.
And so I'm wondering if we're now starting to see, and he's from the opposite end of the ideological spectrum. He's actually pretty conservative, judging from what I read on the things he's gotten in trouble for, things like saying that somebody who procured an abortion for a 9-year-old girl was in this great state of grave sin because they did that. And other things. He's taken some very unpopular positions, which also probably why he's not Pope Mobile. Doesn't mean he won't be Pope. Remember, I like to point out to people that most people's prognostications on who's going to be Pope in the last century have all failed except for one time that I'm aware of, and that was in 2005. And we were all nearly wrong in 2005 because nobody saw Jorge Mario Bergoglio coming, and he nearly became Pope in 2005.
You mean 2013? Oh, yeah. He almost made it in 2005, but got the nod in 13. Yeah, I think we're all pretty sure that Benedict was going to walk out on that balcony, though, in 05, right?
Yeah, that's what it is, but apparently people were shocked by how close it was in those days. So don't take too many prognostications on who's going to be Pope seriously. God knows who the next Pope's going to be. We're all just sort of guessing.
Right.
But it does look like, a lot of your key Francis-friendly figures are getting a lot of FaceTime in front of the cameras with these rosary processions.
Well, so what do you make of Ray then? Right before Francis went into the hospital, he extended Ray's position, and because he was supposed to be replaced. I think when Francis dies, Ray's going to be in charge of the funeral arrangements, if I'm not mistaken.
That's interesting then, because something I've not wanted to comment on publicly because I hate this. Let's go start thinking about Pope Francis's death. But looming over this is the treatment Benedict XVI received, and how Francis apparently changed the rules on what a papal funeral looks like, taking it from this monarchical state affair to something more subdued. Is Cardinal Ray going to follow those rules? Or is he going to give him a funeral more befitting the Vicar of Christ? Something that was not given to Benedict XVI. It's a question I have.
Yeah, I think it's a question a lot of people are asking right now as more and more people are starting to talk about conclaves and potential candidates, and it does seem a wee bit morbid to have that conversation when the pontiff is still alive in a hospital bed in Italy. But at the same time, do you think, I believe that the lay faithful should be told exactly what is going on. I don't believe the Pope, in my humble opinion, so take it with a massive grain of salt, but I don't believe the Pope is entitled to that level of confidentiality. He is the most public person on planet Earth. He's the Vicar of Christ on Earth, and he is the servant of all. So his health should be public knowledge to the body of Christ, in my humble opinion, number one. Number two is if he's dying, we should pray very intentionally for that, not just vaguely or generally. And number three, then we need to be about the business of praying for this conclave, those that are going to vote, and who will come out on that balcony next, shouldn't we?
The interesting thing about this, if we're headed to a conclave, it's going to happen during Lent, a Lenten conclave.
Wow.
Which means that you have the ability, as a faithful Catholic, regardless of whatever else you think about Pope Francis and the rest, to offer your Lenten fastings and sacrifices for a holy Pope and for the conclave cardinals to do what it is they're supposed to be doing, which is to pray. They're supposed to pray and fast and ask and unite their will to God and then do what they believe is God's will, as opposed to politicking. That's what they should be doing. Yeah. Benedict XVI had a document he wrote the name of it escapes me, where he smacked down the myth that the Holy Ghost actually actively chooses the Pope. It's one of those weird post-Vatican I myths, because to suggest that God actively chooses each Pope raises a lot of questions and borders on blasphemy, given how some of the characters who've been popes in history, and God does not actively will evil, and there have been some real characters there.
I think a lot of people wish they would love to think that the Holy Ghost is responsible for it, because then that endorses all of their pet agendas, right? Oh, well, the Holy Ghost has picked the Pope, so therefore everything is okay and fine. As it's like it's just the most bizarre thing ever.
Yeah. Some of it's wacky. The Holy Ghost picks the Pope, ergo Pope Francis and Dr. Fauci are on the same side.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
As if God can't write straight with crooked lines. What crooked lines? There are no crooked lines. The Holy Ghost picked. There's no everything's straight now. Okay, right, sure. Mm-hmm. We're running out of time here. I want to get into some of this. If we can hang out in the after show, maybe we can continue the conversation. But what about curveballs in the lineup? Pizzaballa, Cardinal Sarah. Do they have any chance?
That depends. I tend to think you're not likely to see a what some call an anti-Israel cardinal in the Gaza Strip right now becoming pope, partially because he's so young, but also because he was just a geopolitical landmine, basically. But he's loved by both progressives and conservatives, which actually is a red flag for me. If he's big with progressives, I now want people to go look and do the things he's done that would make him big with progressives, other than for calling for an end to the war there, because that's not an ideological thing. Other than maybe be speaking some stuff about Israel, but it does give me a pause. But he's 59 years old, and I can't imagine them wanting a pope who could be there 30 years. Can you imagine the current crop of cardinals choosing a 30-year reigning pontiff? I can't see that.
I think it all comes down to, I was having this conversation with my kids as we're running out of time now. The next man, he might be someone who has, Orthodox theology. He holds the faith, praise be to God, but he has no constitution of character. He has no strength of will to govern properly, and therefore he might be a kite in the wind. Or you might get a guy who has liberal, opinions about things, like modernist opinions about things, but also has no constitution of character, no force of will to govern. And you might just find yourself right smack dab in the middle, go alone to get along. No drama, please. I think that might be a very likely outcome, but I want to talk more about that with you in the after show. We'll see you guys right back here tomorrow morning. Michael Hitchborn will be here. Until then, God love you.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our Church. Catholic radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
And we're back. Welcome to the after show, everyone.
I hate to do this, but I have to duck out for a couple minutes to make my kids breakfast. But they'll come back and we'll talk about all that stuff.
Okay, we'll see when you get back.
We'll say hi to everyone.
I'll chat. We'll chat amongst ourselves until you return. Praise be to God. I am not in my studio, and it's driving me absolutely mad. I don't like not being in my studio. I had to pause from my studio, hopefully only for today, because we are dealing with some mold issues that we're trying to investigate, and we needed to cut the wall open and things like that. So we're having some work done, but hopefully I'll be back in the studio and be back to normal camera angles and all the rest. Plus, there's the smoke detector going off. I don't know about you, but my smoke detectors only tell us, hey, the battery needs changed in the middle of the night. Never during the day, only in the middle of the night. I don't know why it's that way, but it's always been that way at my house. It's absolutely insane. Tim H., welcome back to the chat box, brother. Good to see you again. You're on the team for Cardinal Sarah for Pope. Remind me when Dr. Stein gets back, it's still by canon law, they can vote any male who's a Catholic into the chair, right?
I believe so.
So you could, not that it will happen. I don't think there's any chance of it happening, but I think it's still a thing. Like, you can still do that. So Strickland could be on the dance card. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Christopher says, poor Joe feels out of his natural. I do. It feels terrible. Fortunately, it sounds like he won't have to raise her to the ground. Won't have to raise her to the ground. I must have missed that one.
I think
the house,
raising the house to the ground. Is that what you were talking about?
Is that how you say that? Is that the figure of speech? Raise the house to the ground.
It's raise, RAZE. Raise the building.
Raise the building.
Yep. That's funny because you can have a barn raising, and then you can raise the barn down to the ground.
That's why it's messing with my mind right now.
Exactly.
I'm thinking raise the barn. That's like build, right? Like, there's build the barn.
RAISE.
But we're
is
talking
raise.
about the destroying of it.
And then to raise the buildings is to R-A-Z-E. Yep.
Got it.
It probably comes from the same root as razor, which you shave with. You're shaving everything down to the flat.
Shave?
I'll bet they come to a similar
shave.
Root.
Is that a Latin
Shave.
word? Shave.
Yeah, shave. Like
what does that
like
mean?
Once shaved, always shaved, Joe. That's the motto from my new razor company.
I don't know.
Evangelical razors. Once shaved, always shaved.
So we only going to buy one razor from you?
Yeah, it's not a very good business plan.
Not a very good business plan. Like, okay, great. Thanks. Whatever. I don't shave, but okay. Okay. God gave us hair on our face for a reason. So there's that.
Yeah, to sell razors.
To sell razors for. That's right.
Obviously.
Paul, our friend from Buffalo, good morning. Jen Nugent, good morning to you. Gunslinger, Damon, good morning. Mateus from sunny California is up early today. Good morning to you, brother. You need to go back to bed, though. You need to get back in bed. Get some sleep, man. You need some sleep. Scrolling backwards. Janice, Jane, Eileen, Trad, Jack Burton, Tweed and Toe. Becky Hansen, good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today. Leah's mama, good morning to you. Alejandro, good morning. Mike K., our friend from Virginia. I just got a very interesting invite yesterday to a conference of sorts out in the Blue Ridge Mountains come May. I might be going to that. It looks very interesting. Christopher, again, good morning. Thanks for being on the team today. Praise be to God. Maureen O'Leary from sunny Ireland. Praise be to God. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Yvonne, good morning. Low Key is here. Helen Grace is here. Abraham Phillip is here. Good morning. Improximus. Raising the Bastions. Von Balthasar's 1953 manifesto on breaking down the structures of the church. Edu, good morning to you. Douglas, good morning. Jake sounds like he had a high SAT. Whoopsies. High SAT score. Did you have a high SAT score, Jake?
Decently high, yeah.
Decently high. What are you? Is it just because you're trying not to brag, or what?
I didn't do as great on the math as I probably should have, but I did fantastic on the other two categories. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like what was it? I remember. I can't remember back that far. I didn't get a high score on my.
Bring me back that far. You're not that old. Good grief! Like
it was a long time ago. I've been through a lot since then.
Okay.
I did take the ACT. Predicting the future. I took the ACT test as well.
You did?
Yeah, ACT.
Interesting.
So, and I think I got a 31 out of 35 or whatever it was. I can't remember what the high score was. I think I got a 31. So.
Man,
it did pretty decent.
I got scared. I'm going to be honest with you. By the time I was playing catch up in high school, because all my peers were like way ahead of me in academics and everything else. Because I was a troubled child in middle school and grade school, and I didn't take my education very seriously until I was going in from the 8th grade going into the 9th, and I'm like, man, I better get my act together quick. And so I spent my high school really trying to play catch up. And when it came time to graduate, I had a very convenient excuse to not take my SAT or ACT. Although I prepared for the ACT, but didn't end up taking it. And that was the Gulf War. And that became a very convenient excuse to just enlist and not have to take the exam and face the consequences of not being better students along the way. Although I did have, I was on the honor roll for all 4 years of high school. Praise be to God. So I started college through the military, so I didn't even need to take the test. Bennies.
Nice.
Abraham Phillip, good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today. Francesca, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out. Yvonne, Laura, I see you there. Patrick, Mason, good morning. KSW, Benedictine Oblate, welcome back. Glad to see you here. iCatholic Radio, you there? Yeah, we're here. We're here. Eric Powell, good morning to you. Juan, good morning. I've been getting Spanish social media videos that the Pope died. Really? I've heard people say this. I have heard the rumor that some people are saying the Pope has already passed. I have not seen any posts like that at all myself from anybody.
Perfect timing for that because Dr. Stine is back with us.
Dr. Stine is back on the team. Praise be to God. Have you've seen people saying that the Pope has already died, right?
Yeah, and it really annoys me when I see people doing that. Can you imagine the thinking behind in the mind of a Catholic saying, "I'm going to make up a bunch of nonsense"? Is the non-scandalous word I'll use for it, even though I really want to start talking about bull droppings with this. But can you imagine the thinking that goes behind somebody going, "I'm just going to make up a bunch of stuff about the Pope being dead"? Like, I can't even imagine the thinking. And right up there are the people out there who are, the church tells you that if a mystic is unapproved and the bishop has said bad things about them, that you should be ignoring them. Well, there are people out there promoting a probably false mystic out there who has dubbed Pope Francis the false prophet, as in the capital F, capital P, false prophet, and who says that he is going to be on death's door, who will then have a miraculous healing. And then people will say, "Oh, he's a living saint" as a consequence of this, and which will then usher in the Antichrist will come. And they're saying this is Pope Francis, and they're doing this without any thought about, like, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. What if I haven't got that correct exactly? What then?
And I've got other people saying, "Oh, there won't be another pope because the St. Malachi prophecy." I'm like, okay, one, the St. Malachi prophecy has been mostly discredited at this point.
Yeah.
Or everyone is reading it wrong because there's one priest who kind of looked at the St. Malachi prophecy, looked at the lineup of popes attributed to it, and realized there's a bunch of anti-popes from the Great Western Schism listed as valid popes in the St. Malachi prophecy, at least in the interpretations of it. And so people are basing what they think off of really in lack of credible sources. And it just blows my mind, the lack of credible
I think Eric's
thinking.
right. I think it's clickbait. I just think that they're throwing gas on the fire. They're just trying to be contrarians and stirring the pot.
There are Catholic content creators who are torching their credibility right now with the way they're covering this. There's a guy out of Europe, won't say his name. Never really cared for the guy because he promotes Medjugorje. Not a fan of Medjugorje. But who was out there parroting all the rumors as if they're facts from, the Francis is going to be dead by the end of the week stuff. And it's like, are you thinking about your own personal consequences for this because of what you're doing to other people's faith?
Yeah.
It's scandalous what people are doing. And this is why I'm seeing articles now talking about, out of Europe, talking about how there are a whole host of traditionalist content creators online wishing for the death of Pope Francis publicly.
I know.
Like, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, guys.
You're the best. That's amazing.
Meanwhile, Taylor Marshall is being criticized for being too nice. I'm probably going to start getting hammered for being too nice about this.
That's the world we live in, isn't it?
I will remind you, every one of us will stand before Jesus Christ someday, and we'll have to make an account of every errant thing that comes out of our mouth. Okay?
I know. Scary, isn't it?
And I'm pretty sure Jesus will be forgiving for an honest mistake. But when it comes to this stuff, people should know better.
Yeah.
They really should.
Yeah, it comes down to charity, real and true charity. For the same reason why we feel the need to call a spade and stand up to the errors in the church, no matter who they come from, is the same charity that we say we have to pray for these people. Like, if you're not praying for the wolves in sheep's clothing, then you are failing in charity. Because they have a soul, and that soul will end up in either heaven or hell, and we should be praying that they will end up in heaven. Let's ask God, Our Lady, to intercede so that proper reconciliations can be made and a good and holy death can be had. And if we're not praying for that very specific intention, then we are failing in charity. And that's what gets me. Again, I just keep going back to that, like the whole idea that the Pope is treated like he's some sort of private citizen. He's not a private citizen. It comes with the job. When you take the chair of Peter, you are no longer yourself. You don't belong to you anymore. You belong to the people. So you don't like that, you don't want that, then don't take the job. That's my advice. Don't accept.
If we were not living in the modern media age where information is practically instantly delivered anywhere in the world, because I've been wrestling with this, how much do we have a right to know question? But at the end of the day, we have a right to know things that are true.
Yeah.
Not to be lied to.
Right.
If they want to keep his prognosis a little guarded and spare us a lot of the details, that's one thing. But when you've got a pope who's a media pope like we have now, then allowing people to lie, there's something very sinister about that. And it does
how
make
many
me
times,
wonder.
how many airplane trips and off the cuff comments has he made that they've had to go spin after? And we had to have these debates with Pope's planers after because of these things so he's allowed to do that his entire pontificate. But when it comes time to his actual, health, we're kept in the dark. I'm sorry. That seems hypocritical to me. Just tell us, do you think he's going to recover? Does he have a chance at recovery? If yes, great. Then let's be about the business. If no, then tell us. Then let's be about the business. I mean, it's not simple. It's that straightforward, but we're not entitled. We're just, shut up, sit down, stay in the pew and do what you're told. That's kind of the mode that we've been in the last.
Meanwhile, synodality. Did you see Pope Francis's Lenten prayer intentions that he wrote before he went to the hospital?
No, what were they?
I'll go into a little more detail tomorrow, but Gloria TV's EN News Service summarized it. He repeats his mantra that the church is called to be synodal and even calls for a conversion to synodality, and they're quoting him directly. Nobody knows what synodal or synodality is. Furthermore, Francis proposes to face the, quote, concrete reality of an illegal immigrant. It would be a good Lenten exercise for us to compare our daily life with that of an immigrant. And then it goes on to talk about in the typical Gloria TV, hammering you in the face with their editorializing way of talking about how illegal immigration is great for the human trafficking business among the more questionable bishops, But
that's amazing.
That's what he wrote just before going into the hospital. And then he allowed that to be released after he was in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That's
amazing.
Crazy. Oh, my heavens. A Penn State dad, good morning to you. Says, I've come to the realization that the more I know, the less I actually know. There's also, I would say, some, ignorance is bliss kind of, beauty too. Like the more drama that we talk about coming out of the Vatican and this College of Cardinals and the potential next Pope, the more it matters that you might just want to live in a state of grace, pursue virtue, and be obedient to your state in life, and then not worry about the rest, because it just gets very dramatic.
Sure, but we were all chosen. God put us on this earth at this time for a reason.
Yeah. Gorguenza 61. Good morning, Nick the Mike. KZ2. Good Lynn Pine. Good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Our normal crew on Facebook is also here hanging out with us. John Andrew says, I love the after show. Blessed Justo Takayama, pray for us. So you must have a devotion to Blessed Justo Takayama, because I see you post that like every day. That's awesome. Thanks for doing it. Jane, good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today. David John is here from iCatholic Mobile. Good morning to you, John. David John, thanks for being on the team. Praise be to God. Junior Barra, good morning to you. Mimi, I see you over there. Patty, Don Paddock, good morning to you. Elizabeth, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today, being on the team, being a part of the conversation. Chesty Semper Fi. Jeff Horn says, recent convert, working hard to focus on my spiritual journey and not the church political journey. Yay and amen. Now, I will say this. There's a balance act here. You don't want to be ignorant of what's going on. You want to be aware of what's going on, because especially like your prayers, your intentions, your sacrifices, again, if no one is sacrificing for the wolves in sheep's clothing, then who's going to pray for them? No one. So God has called you to do that. He's called me to do that. So we should sacrifice for the salvation of the wolves in sheep's clothing, because otherwise there's no one to intercede for them. So we have to be somewhat aware. We can't let it consume us. Therein lies the key, which is why I find like Dr. Stein's channel so incredibly valuable to me, because he covers news and stories that aren't being covered elsewhere. So I have a resource now that I can go to and get educated on that. I don't have to spend the rest of my day doing it. I can just watch his channel and get that information.
I'd probably get more views if I only cover Cardinal Supich and McElroy and the North American Cardinals in general. I probably would, honestly.
That's
I wouldn't get random viewers in India driving down my monetization rate because, ad revenue from India isn't nearly as valuable as, say, ad revenue from the United States is. But
it's true.
you want a
True.
big picture on how their state of the church, you got to go look at what's going on in Eastern Europe and in South America and other places. In fact, sometimes you want to you want to realize how lucky you have it in North America. You got to know what's going on in South America, because it could be worse for us here in North America.
It could be. I do want to get into some of that, although I'm Sister Anna Pauline, Sister Anna Pauline, good morning to you, says, do I have any thoughts on Tomasino, the Tomasino accusation of Mr. Vigano, or is that supposed to say Monsignor Vigano? Maybe it says Monsignor, I don't know. Yeah, MGR. So Monsignor Vigano. I'm not familiar with that accusation. Let me know what it is, and I can try to comment on it.
I know that there are people saying that his Exsurge Domine is not what it looks like. That he's
I
allegedly ordaining men who shouldn't be ordained, or consecrating bishops or something. But
he wouldn't be the first to do so if that's true. I hope it's not true, but he wouldn't be the first to do so. Look at what Calvin Robinson. I mean, look at his pedigree in ordination. I mean, there's a I won't say his name, but there is a Catholic who made the speaking circuit for a number of years. He was a Protestant pastor who became Catholic, and he was determined to get ordained. I mean, really determined. And he tried for years and years and years to get accepted at a seminary, even though he was an older man, married with children, and just, it wasn't working out. And he would hunt down these wild threads, these bishops that would have, apostolic succession through back channels, and they were kites in the wind off on their own. And he would try to hunt them down to get them to lay hands on them and all of that. And I just kind of felt pity for him. I'm like, dude, that's not God's will. Like, what do you like? Stop it. Just stop it. If it's God's holy will, then the path will be made open to you, even if you can't see it today.
Do you remember the now late Deacon Alex Jones? No relation to the guy.
I knew him. I knew him. I was one of the last people to visit with him.
So you're aware of his story where he did look into ordination, and the Vatican said no, so he just accepted it.
Exactly.
Accepted being in the diaconate.
Yeah, he brought a good chunk of his Protestant congregation with him into the Catholic Church. He was an amazing man. He was no traditionalist, that's for sure, but he was an amazing man. He really was. I really enjoyed talking and spending time with him. I hired him to come in and speak for me at an event that I was hosting here in Houston many years ago, right before he died. I do want to get into some of these names, though. You mentioned India a minute ago. How about Cardinal Ranjith out of Sri Lanka?
He's not a cardinal I paid that much attention to, but I had a conversation with somebody the other day who said, Ranjith would be great because he's very conservative. And he famously said if he had his way, he'd have the SSPX priests teaching theology in his seminaries, which immediately makes him go up like 10 points for me, because you can say whatever else you want about the SSPX, but their theology would be identifiably Catholic 100 years ago.
Well, I think it also illustrates the complexity of the SSPX on a global scale, in the sense that in America, we have a very Americanized view of, like, I'm not SSPX. I don't go to their chapel. I've been to one SSPX mass in my entire life, and that was at a funeral.
And it was not that different really than any other traditional Latin mass you've gone to, probably.
Of course it wasn't. But my point, I'm just trying to say that, listen, I'm not like SSPX. So I'm not like saying, hey, I'm not biased in that regard. That's the whole reason why I brought that up. But our view, when Catholics think of SSPX, we think of it from an American lens of what we've been told about the SSPX. But when you look at stories from around the world, the SSPX has quite the different relationship in most other not in all of the countries, but in a lot of other countries. It's a much more cooperative relationship with the local diocese. Even in Argentina, Francis had a great relationship with the SSPX.
This is why people can't understand how Americans have a hard time understanding, why does Pope Francis tolerate the SSPX? It's not just tolerate. The word is he approved of them consecrating new bishops. They were just now wanting him to approve who he was.
If he dies,
do they get?
a new
I know
bishop?
that's a thing. That's something I'll talk about if it happens. Like, look, this is where they were. Now are they going to do it on their own? Because here's the thing. Some of these more conservative bishops are conservative in a Benedict XVI kind of conservative way.
Sure.
And many of them will be less likely to honor that approval of bishops. They just would be.
Damn.
Cardinal Burke is Exhibit A.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say, unless Ranjith gets the nod, I don't see the SSPX getting a bishop officially.
They're going to have to do it independently. They're down to 2 bishops.
I know,
and
they're getting down to the wire now. So
they'll have to. Like they published an article on one of their websites recently talking about essentially admitting that that there is a deadline approaching for them to keep the society going for the long term or not.
Right.
And this is not as simple as just bringing Bishop Strickland, who is not a traditionalist. So there's a problem right there, or other canceled high profile bishops. You can't just bring them in. You have to make sure that they're actually dedicated to the mission of Archbishop Lefebvre, which usually means somebody from within the SSPX.
Since we live in the age of synodality, what do you think there's going to be? What do you think the chances are that the sentiment in the conclave would be? Well, we got to have a pope from Africa. We got to have a pope from Asia. We got to have a pope from South America again, or something like that. What do you think how much of an emphasis do you think the cardinals will put on, well, regardless of who there is to choose from, we've got to pick another pope, not from Europe?
I tend to think the answer to that question is it depends entirely on how large does the overall immigration into the West problem loom over the church at this point in the minds of the College of Cardinals. You remember, Cardinal Supich actually got the U.S. bishops to basically admit that abortion was no longer the preeminent issue now. My illegal immigration was for the United States. And if, like Liz Yore's accusation that 80% of the Vatican's funding comes from the United States through various channeled through NGOs, then this is going to loom large over it. So that's a complicating question. And it's a material, but you'll notice this is everything I just said is materialism, including the whole, we need to have somebody brought in from the peripheries. This isn't the question of, is this going to be, as Robert Royal talked about at the very end of his piece that I scanned while I was waiting for you to bring me on, is that he says at the very end, our next pope will need to be not merely as cunning as a serpent and gentle as a dove. Ideally, he'll have a soul as otherworldly as a hermit and a spirit as fierce as a warrior. In other words, we used to think about, we need a holy person who actually is good at management to run the church. They need to be holy, or at least not holy, not unholy, right? They need to be someone who loves God, has a healthy fear of God, and wants to do everything in the best interest of the church, and also has the skill set to do the job. It would be pretty bad to get a saintly type figure in there who was a terrible manager.
Well, I
bring that up because a lot of people describe that as Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI was nobody's example of a great manager.
How about
but
JP1?
Nobody denies that he loved God.
JP1. If you read Father Charles Murr's Murder in the 33rd Degree, it would seem that JP1 didn't have the spinal fortitude to stand up to his own curia. I would argue JP2, even though he was, he did have some spinal fortitude. I would say he did. But still, he tolerated bad actors within the curia. He knew who they were, and he tolerated them. And he just thought, well, I'm going to ignore the curia and go about my business, saving Poland or whatever else. And I'm like, listen, here are the choices. You get a guy who has, the traditional Catholic theology and philosophy, but he has no spinal fortitude and won't do his job. Then he's going to be a kite in the wind. You get a guy with modernist philosophy and theology, but he has no moral fortitude, no spinal fortitude. He's going to be a kite in the wind. And both of those characters are going to be manipulated hard. And they're going to be tossed about by, if Parolin doesn't get the nod and he's still the in charge of the Secretary of State, guess what? Who do you think is going to manipulate that guy? It's going to be these characters. They're going to play him like a fiddle.
This is why I cringe whenever I see somebody wanting a moderately conservative type, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, folks. But again, I keep saying this publicly. The litmus test for a moderate pope, if you don't get a Ranjith or an Ike or some of these more obviously more conservative, like traditionally minded cardinals in, the litmus test for your moderate is how long does Cardinal Fernandez keep his job? That's your litmus test.
Exactly.
Because you either make a very public display of firing him and sending him off to Ketchikan, Alaska to invoke the horrible show, The Young Pope from HBO. The Pope scenes in that show are great. The rest of that show is horrifyingly wicked, so don't watch it. But watch the clips on YouTube. They're very, very, very entertaining.
The clips are funny.
I've
never watched a single episode.
Yeah, don't.
There's a scene where he makes a big display out of wrapping up a subplot of the show where there's a really corrupt American cardinal. He summons him to Rome and says, I'm going to reassign you. And the guy's like, oh, you're showing me mercy. Where would you? And he's like, well, where would you like to go? He's like, oh, I'd love to go to San Francisco. He says, how about we do this? And he spins a globe. He says, put your finger on the map and that's where I'll send you. And he spins a globe, and then the Pope stops at himself on Ketchikan, Alaska, and has this guy say, this cardinal offering mass for Eskimos.
Hey, that would be all right if it was a trad cardinal. I'd be
That'd be
okay
great for
with
the
it.
Eskimos, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be completely fine with it. But we're not, unless you get somebody like that. That's what the treatment Fernandez deserves. But you're not going to. Probably.
Think about what we have to accomplish.
Not going to shake the boat.
We have to have a guy who not only holds the traditional theology philosophy, but he also has to have a spine. He's got to be, and this is what I was trying to get my oldest daughter to truly wrap her head around, because she's having conversations with her peer group about all of this and about what might be happening next. And it's like, Francis was unique. I interviewed Damian Thompson like in the first year or two after Francis's pontificate, and he was telling me about his time at the Vatican Santa Marta Hotel and encountering Pope Francis directly. And he described him. This was early in his pontificate. This guy is a godfather. And that makes him interesting and unique, because most men do not have the stomach to become the godfather, to have your thumb on the pulse. That's why he lives in the hotel. He doesn't want to live in the Vatican apartment because it's too far away from what's going down. He needs to hear and see what's going down. He needs to know who's coming and going. He wants to know what they're talking about.
I fear that the cardinals who could be best described as his capos have been taking notes.
Which means we're going to get another godfather
behind the scenes. The thing I'm more worried about is these guys are working quietly in the background to have somebody ready to go so that they can bypass most of the debates. A lot of people don't realize this. Once the conclave starts, they'll be over in about a week, because they do 3 or 4 ballots a day. And on the 34th ballot, it's 50% plus 1 to win. And the way to circumvent all of that is to have one faction completely ready to go. And yes, I know it violates conclave rules. That didn't seem to bother anybody other than the Beniplenists after Cardinal Daniels admitted that.
Okay.
So again,
let me ask you this.
That's the thing to worry about, to be praying on.
Let me throw another log on the fire here. As far as I know, the canon law does not forbid the cardinals from electing somebody who's not a cardinal, right?
Correct. They, generally speaking, you all you have to do is be a bishop, but they could elect a priest. They just would then consecrate him a bishop on the spot.
Okay,
from everything I've read, you have to be a bishop, but then they can easily just get around that by consecrating the person a bishop.
Well, they could do the same thing for laymen then, right?
In theory, yeah.
I mean, they could.
In theory, an unmarried layman would be you have to be.
They just take them through the levels as quickly as possible.
Worked for Ambrose, right? I have a question, by the way. If we do get the dark horse candidate and it's Pizzaballa, his first name is Pier Battista, which is Peter Baptist. Do we really want all the Saint Malachi prophecy truthers?
Yes.
To have a pope with the first name Peter?
Do.
Peter
Absolutely.
Baptist.
100%.
This is why I want Hollerich or Togle. I'd rather have that for one reason.
No, come on. That's less fun.
But if
I were elected Pope, I would take Peter II.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You're such a troll,
I want the St. Malachi people to take the loss, to take the big L,
get over it.
Actually reevaluate their adherence to Catholic prophecy, their own reading of it. Because
it's less fun if we do it that way, though.
Right. But yeah, no, I don't want any of the guys named Peter being Pope in general, because I also don't want it to turn out to be true either. I mean,
yeah, well said, exactly. Yeah,
that's correct.
that means that somehow, if we want to really go, the full spectrum on conspiracy nuttiness, that means that Jared Kushner is going to come out as the Antichrist or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go all the way.
Yeah,
and no.
Well, then I'll owe White Wolf the $100 if that.
So you have to pay up.
Yeah, I'll have to pay up.
Oof, that'll be embarrassing. That won't stop us from talking
about it. Did you make a monetary bet that the next Pope would be Peter the Roman?
No, I made it. Someone's convinced that by this time, I forget what the date is, but someone's convinced we're not making it through this Trump term without basically the end of the world coming. There have been multiple doom prophesiers in the chat, and White Wolf is the only one who took up my bet, and he in fact raised it from my original bet of $10. Which, so props to him for actually putting his money where his mouth is, even though if he wins, he doesn't have to pay it. So it's like it's. Or if I win, he doesn't. Whatever it is, he's fine.
There's a prominent account on X that tweets out things about approved and kind of gray area Catholic prophecy.
Yeah,
and we'll actually go directly to public officials and tell them that they need to actually start reading Catholic prophecy to know what's going on, which I think makes them look kind of like a nut when they're doing this.
Yes,
but they say that there's some contemporary figure out in Europe saying that Trump's going to have a repeat of last summer happen here in the next month to 3 months, and that he'll probably survive it. But 2025 is going to look like a golden year. And then 2026 is when Russia rolls its secret armies across Europe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not so sure Russia has the capability of doing anything like that right now. They'd have to.
They don't, but they have made an alliance with North Korea, who's got like 5 million men. They could throw into a meat grinder.
Yeah,
and that Kim Jong-un, that's possible. Yeah,
Kim Jong-un is not exactly the nicest guy. So, but that having been said, they're making all these prophecies. Oh, the American economy is going to be totally destroyed, and so we'll either sit out the war or we'll be caught snuck unawares by nuclear armaments. I'm like, there's another reason we'd sit out the war. You notice the U.S. government is overtly moving away from NATO.
Yeah,
we basically burned our bridges with the European warmongers. Like the Europeans are like, we're going to send troops to Ukraine, and most Americans are like, whoa, we didn't ask for this.
Right.
This came out this morning. There's a bipartisan group in Congress rejecting Trump's attempts to end the war in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They have explicitly said they want to keep it going until Russia suffers a humiliating defeat.
Yeah,
their words. Now, my hope is that people are going to start going through all those federal databases and find out that those guys are all on the take from the Ukraine war.
Yep.
That they've all made a lot of money, and then we can get those guys impeached or at least silenced. So I'm not willing to destroy civilization for Ukraine. I'm just not willing to do it. Sorry if that upsets people. Yeah. I'm not willing to have 4 or 5 billion people die in nuclear holocaust because reasons.
Yeah,
but the Cold War them wanted to keep the war going.
One of the big things too is all of this doom predicting about this is how this is going to play out and everything's going to come to a head. First of all, nothing ever happens, right? But second of all, it's setting yourself and others up. Even if you're the kind of person who's like those Jim Baker types who can keep predicting the end of the world, and then when it doesn't happen, you just cycle right back to another prediction. Even if you're the kind of person who can mentally do that and isn't disturbed, and you can maintain your kind of loco version of the faith with that, you're risking other people's souls of like preparing themselves spiritually, like, oh, it's going to end. 3 days of darkness are coming. I'm ready. And then it doesn't happen. And then and then they lose their faith entirely. That can happen. So even if you're the kind of person who can dodge that bullet, the people that you're talking to and trying to convince it's coming, the world's going to end, just prepare, you're risking other people's faith. That's a horrible, horrible thing to be doing to other people. It's a total lack of charity for others to be, trying to convince everyone that this is coming in that way. Like, this is exactly what's going to happen. And that's not in like a lot of these people think they're the next St. Vincent Ferrer, you know, the angel of the apocalypse. Like, that's not what he did. That's not right, Joe. Well, you've got the beard for it, but
thank you. Thank you.
A lot of people think that's what they are, and it's like, no, you're amping up this sort of like it's a twisted version of that. You know, you're when you're coming in and you're making the focus so much on the politics and predicting how like everything's happening like a puppet show and everything's rigged and scripted. That's not the same as urging people convert personally, you know, because the end might be nigh. Like that, it's different.
Yep.
It is different. And there's just too many people out there who are, same as people who think that that being, you know, insulting is the same thing as calling out sin and error. You know, it's a twisted version of speaking the truth. Like it's all self-gratification. It's not actual, you know, calls for repentance in the way that the saints did. But anyway, there's my soapbox for the day.
No, I agree. But before I forget, and before we sign off today, I wanted to go back to the reason why I asked about the current canon law. So what are the chances we get like a curveball from out of nowhere, you know, whether it's a Strickland or a James Martin or you can come up with any name you want from anywhere on the planet, but just the idea of a man being elected not from the College of Cardinals. What are the chances? Slim to none?
Next to zero. I mean, if Francis is right about anything, it's when he critiques the Cardinals and the bishops for being too insular. Although my dream as somebody whose mission in life is to help wake people up to how bad things are in the church right now would be to have just a total mask off moment of James Martin being elected Pope. I mean,
well,
at that point,
James Martin is like, probably never going to be the Pope, but there is a good chance he becomes an auxiliary bishop someplace very soon.
That's actually what with a consistory, if Francis does announce a consistory and it's like suspiciously short-term consistory, like Ash Wednesday consistory, where he says, like, Cardinals all have to be in Rome right now, and you find out they've all got hotel stays planned for much longer than just 2 days for a consistory, and then you see, James Martin goes there on behalf of American media, and then he becomes, a day later he's announced as the auxiliary bishop to in San Diego, or more likely Washington D.C. under Cardinal McElroy.
Yeah. Man.
By the way, that article from Info Vaticana gives 3 nightmare papal candidates, and one of them is 2 people because, in their words, they're the exact same person, basically, and that's Supich and McElroy. That's one nightmare.
I saw that. That's great. Like, they don't even deserve their own paragraphs. Okay, we're gonna mash these two together. And have they ever been seen in the same room at the same time? Are they really?
Yes, there's a picture of them sitting there talking to Pope Francis. Actually, back in November.
That was AI. That was AI. Come on now. It's just AI. Yeah. But I mean, listen, there's never going to be an American Pope. Is that fair to say?
Not while America's a world power. It's not.
Yeah. No, not going to happen. It's too political. It's too hotbed. But like Timothy Dolan, he's a modernist. He's go along to get along. He's not the conservative.
He's Mr. Moderate Modernist.
Yeah.
That's what he is.
Yeah, so I don't see none of these candidates would not only would I don't see them happening, but I wouldn't want them anyway. As far from the Info Vaticana.
Cardinal Sarah. That article mentions Cardinal Sarah and says that he's the sleeper candidate, deserves a fair option, a fair discussion. He's 79.
Okay.
He will be barred from participating in the conclave at the age of 80, which happens at some point this summer. I don't remember when his birthday is precisely. And if Francis holds on that long, if we're all subject to this endless updates on Pope Francis for the next 6 months, which could happen, then Cardinal Sarah will be aged out. But there's a chance that he could be elected pontiff, because the flip side of that is it's generally recognized that the church is very divided because of Francis. So what if they brought in somebody who was older, who wouldn't be there very long, a John the 23rd type figure?
Well, that would be Sarah, but does he have the spinal fortitude? Does he have the spinal fortitude to govern the Curia? I'm not convinced he does.
I don't think he does. I think theologically he's one of the better minds today theologically. He says all the right things about the liturgy. Well, most of the right things about the liturgy.
Yeah.
You know he'll never be Pope, by the way? I can tell you why he's a long shot. The Eastern patriarchs would vote against him.
Interesting. They don't like him.
Cardinal Sarah said in one of his books that he would actually end the practice of married priests in the East. He thinks it was a mistake, allowing them to keep it up. I tend to agree with him, but that's why he would be barred from it. The Eastern Rite, like a lot of Eastern Catholics have flat out said they will go become Orthodox if he becomes Pope.
Okay. So, all right, it's time to put your cards on the table then. Who is the most likely candidate to get the nod then?
I don't know who the most likely is. It wouldn't shock me, though, if you had a lot of conservative and traditional Catholics doing cartwheels when Cardinal Mueller walked out on the loggia, because they don't know a thing about his own modernist tendencies. He says a lot of great things now, but if you go back 10 years and look at the stuff he said theologically, you know, he plays fast and loose with, like, the Garden of Eden, for instance. He does. Yeah. He's said some stuff that makes it sound like he doesn't think it was real.
Yikes.
You know, yeah. So, again, Mueller says the right things about resisting what's going on here, and he has said, like, perfect things about our duties to be praying for the salvation of Francis's soul and things. But it wouldn't surprise me. People were, like, alarmed when there were a picture came out of
Mueller
him
standing
shoulder to shoulder with James Martin.
I don't think Mueller has a chance. No way. I can't see it.
His chances are diminished because he has come out against synodality.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to figure out who would be like a sleeper candidate, take a look at those moderate appearing cardinals who are big on synodality, who've never really said anything critical about Pope Francis, who implemented Traditionis Custodes and all the rest of that stuff. But maybe they didn't go so far with Traditionis Custodes. You're looking for that people from that crop for your moderate choice, moderate appearing. And the thing is, the moderate appearing guy is not going to go in and do the thing that needs to be done.
No,
which is
certainly not.
Clean out the Roman Curia.
I think Pizzaballa or Besungu. Now, Besungu, who flew to the bishops in Africa dispatched to the Vatican to critique, edit, and change the Fiducia Supplicans document. You know, everybody thought, the African bishops, they stood up, they did the right thing. Even I said that many times, but I also made the caveat to say, yeah, they're picking and choosing still. They aren't going to tolerate, homosexuality, but they turned a blind eye towards divorce and remarriage. They didn't bother to defend that one, did they? They let that one go. So I feel like
they're also big on polyamory.
I think Pizzaballa could come out on that balcony for something you said earlier, that he's liked on both sides of the equation. So that gives him a good base of support. But also there is a bit of a pro-Gaza sentiment in the Curia right now, which he is pro-Gaza, and I think rightly so, in my opinion, as far as supporting the Christians there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out on that balcony.
Put on your tinfoil hat for this one, for this question.
I got my.
You know that Doge is cleaning out the federal government right now, and we've got a new director of the CIA, and they're all doing this stuff. It's also been all but established that the CIA has been manipulating the Vatican for decades, and may have very well been manipulating the Vatican in the last conclave.
Right.
Are they going to sit this one out?
No. I said that yesterday.
With all the auditors watching, are they going to sit this one out?
Nope.
Probably not. So who then is in the best interests of either the deep state or in the new vision of the of American hegemony in a multipolar world that Trump pushes? Parolin. Or somebody who wants the church to stay out of things entirely. So who would that be?
Yeah, but Parolin knows where all the bones are buried. He's obviously been in high level of governance at the Vatican City State. He has all the connections. He understands who the players are, and he's highly political. Highly political.
This is why you need to watch Parolin in the coming days. I
can tell you from a firsthand account, Parolin threatened EWTN to their face because of Raymond Arroyo.
And I'm telling you right now, people do not understand this. The hostility to the preconciliar church is not just palpable among a large portion of the bishops and cardinals. It's omnipresent. Many of them don't hide it at all. Parolin is their guy. I could see Hollerich and Mario Gresh, the other major synod player, guy helping run Hollerich run the synod, backing Parolin, and also lobbying cardinals from the peripheries.
Eck would scare me.
And Eck is considered on the conservative side.
Tagley would just be a stooge. I don't mean to be that insulting to him. I'm really not trying to insult him, but
Tagley would be great for comedians.
He feels like a guy who sits in the chair because they need someone to sit in the chair, but somebody else, there'd be a wizard behind the curtain if Tagley was sitting there. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like he is a paper tiger.
Let me take a look at how old Cardinal Tagle is, because he looks old. He looks young, relatively young. Cardinal Tagle, how old is he? 67. You are looking at a potential. Tagle stepped out of the Logia. You're looking at potentially 20 years.
At least.
Maybe longer. Maybe longer.
Yep.
Medical science is advancing, and the Roman Pontiff, for everything else you might want to say about him, is a world leader, and those guys tend to have better access to things than we do, which is another reason why it would not shock me if Francis did make a recovery.
Yeah.
But they might just keep some of the morally illicit methods they used to keep him around.
John Paul Sandoval reminds us about Cardinal Peter Turkson. Emphasis on Peter.
Yeah.
I'm all for Peter the Roman.
There's some news out this hour. Catholic Sat is sharing. Pope Francis has established a new commission, Comissio de Donationibus pro Sancta Sede, to encourage donations from the faithful, episcopal conferences, and other potential benefactors for the work of the Holy See. That is out. They're posting that this hour. So.
Amazing, all this work he's doing, establishing commissions while he's on a ventilator.
Yeah, establishing commissions to get more money for to the Holy See. Interesting.
Either A, he's
don't we already have Peter's
enough
Pence
to work?
I'm not sure why we need another commission.
Either A, he's well enough to work, or B, he knows he's not well enough and he's running out of time. He's got to get done what he can get done while he still can.
Or he's not well enough to work, and someone's got the rubber stamp of his signature, like with.
Or C, he's a workaholic, and he just can't stop.
The American president, the office of the American president and he's not the only one who has this, but it's a machine that duplicates his signature for official documents.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
When they send him an electronic document or something that needs an actual signature that requires it many times, so he doesn't hurt himself doing it. They have something for that. I'm sure that they have that in the Vatican, and it would not shock me if it ever was revealed that Francis had been much worse off than they're telling us. In this whole time, he was just sort of nodding to people. Yeah, go ahead and sign that. Go ahead and sign that. Go ahead and sign that, and then just issuing things.
Sister Anna Pauline brings up we talked about this earlier about the rumors about Pope Francis having already passed away. Here's why I don't believe that is credible. Mm-hmm. Because if Francis was already passed and the hospital itself was hiding this information from us, we would have heard about it from those who have solid contacts within. Raymond Arroyo has come out and said that he's got contacts at Gemelli, and he's also said that he was close to death. So we would be hearing there was somebody somewhere. That's the thing about conspiracy theories, that one of the things that always gets me, because I worked for the government once, and we can't keep secrets. You can't ask more than a person to keep a secret, really. If you have a team of people, you're already out of luck. There's no way you're going to get that many people all on the same page, all keeping the secret and to their dying breath. It's just never going to happen, especially something so big that so many people are talking about. So if Francis was already dead, the janitor at the hospital is going to tell somebody. You know what I mean? It's going to be somebody somewhere is going to say something to someone, and it's going to get slipped through. And you're not going to have to go very far afield. That's the other thing. You don't got to go.
I'm not going to be. I hate to be crude about this.
Yeah,
but the very act of wheeling his remains out of his room into wherever they store it.
He's a big guy.
You're going to have people who see it. You're going to see security guards who are going to see it.
Yep.
You'll have some nurse. They may all sign NDAs, right. And then immediately after signing that NDA, they're going to go talk to Il Messaggero or something.
Yeah,
and the game will be
and it's not going to just come from some anonymous, no-name account on social media. It's going to come from more official sources. You're going to that's the whole reason why yesterday Dr. Stine, you covered this on your show, and I played the video clip of Cardinal Dolan actually saying he thinks Francis is on near death. Because, I mean, I'm not going to conspiratorial sources. I'm not going to rad-trad anti-Francis sources. I showed the video yesterday of Cardinal Dolan actually saying that he's near death and you need to pray for him. Like very mainstream. Raymond Arroyo, very mainstream. You don't have to go too far afield to get to some credible sources. And that's my opinion. So if at the end of the day, he had already passed, my argument is we would have already seen someone from more mainstream sources suggesting this as well. And we haven't seen that yet. So until then, I don't see it. I just don't see it. I want to know if the Kandahar Giant story of 2002 is true. I don't believe the Kandahar Giant story of 2002.
Flying Tigers is on the team, by the way, and he has
Rob.
He has a comment here. He has some trusted church sources as well, and he says they're telling him that the Pope's condition is critical, as they're saying, but they really are unable to say how close to death he actually is, and so it really could be weeks or months. Basically that. So in essence, the whole thing about the guarded prognosis is because they still can't tell exactly how long. I can totally see that. The most shocking thing to me would be that the Vatican reports from the doctors have been totally accurate, and they're basically just saying exactly what it is. We just don't know what's going on. We just don't know. We can't tell.
But why don't they just say that then? You know what I mean? Like say, hey guys, we just don't know. We're trying to figure this out. We hope he'll survive for sure. We're planning for that. We're working towards that goal, but we just don't know.
Yeah, there's such a weird tone.
He rested peacefully, and he's working.
That's the thing. He's working. The prognosis remains critical but stable. Just like it sounds like.
It sounds like CYA.
Yeah,
it sounds like they're covering their backsides.
I would appreciate. Yeah, I if they could be a little more about like. It's pretty touch and go. Like if they could be a little more colloquially in their language, even like it's touch and go. We're not sure how long. Again, that causes more worries. I'm sure they're trying to control the narrative as best they can.
But that's the part I hate. Exactly. I don't want them to control the narrative. I just want them to be honest.
Yeah, I know.
Stop trying to control the stinking narrative and just put it out there. This is what the Pope's going through right now. We are working towards healing him and getting him better. We just don't know how this is going to come out, though, guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
we don't know how this is going to come out, but it did come out like a year ago that the St. Gallen Mafia had new members and were meeting like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So they're prepared. That doesn't mean that they're going to win, but they'll win this one. But again, and it came from a fairly mainstream source. It was one of those European news outlets that I frequently cite. They weren't hiding what they were doing.
Who's the guy in Canada? On the Info Vaticana article, they list Michael Czerny.
Yeah.
How do you say his name?
I don't know anything. I usually go with Czerny, but I know I'm not saying it right.
Czerny. Is it?
Let me go take a look.
Well, I guess my question is, okay, Americans definitely not, but Canadians? Could a Canadian get the nod, or are they just a wee bit too close to the Americans? He's a
Czechoslovakian-born Canadian Catholic prelate. He serves as the prefect for the. He served as the prefect for the Dicastery of Promotion of Integral Human Development.
Sounds
That's the
very
Sustainable
modernist.
Development or Laudato Si kind of thing. So you're not going to find a trad or a very conservative person.
No, but
in the Laudato Si.
Do you think
Dicastery.
he has a chance because he's Canadian? Is he too close to America to get the nod? Is Canada considered the same way Americans are considered as far as the potential to be elected?
I know that South Americans don't really. Oftentimes, they'll just call us all North Americans and be dismissive. But I don't think that the people who have a higher understanding of things do that. Especially with the political climate now, he could be a repudiation of Trump. Right. I mean, there are people out there who will just see things that simply because we are talking about people, enough cardinals in the church, enough bishops who have a purely materialistic worldview. We see things as politics, which makes you wonder why they chose a career in the episcopate instead of, the private sector.
Interesting. I don't know how I'd feel about a Canadian sitting on the chair of Peter. That'd be. We'd be living.
Do you like the idea of a Canadian or a Jesuit more?
I'll take a Canadian. Thank you.
We'd have to get a denim cassock made.
Denim Catholic.
Well, here's the thing. Well, here's the thing. With Michael Czerny or whatever, you'd get both because he's a Canadian Jesuit.
Oh,
There you go.
I'm not even kidding.
that's not good.
That's not good.
That's less than optimal, as they say. I think we've had enough of the Jesuit pontificate for a while. I think we need to pause that.
I think the next pope. It's safe to say the next pope won't be a Jesuit unless the Jesuits even control most of the College of Cardinals.
Mm.
I wonder how many Jesuits are in the College of Cardinals right now. I don't know.
No, that's a good question too.
I did link to the collegeofcardinalsreport.com site, and you can go there and it lists every single one. I wonder, no, it's not. They don't list any. I'm looking down the list real quickly, and I don't see any like SJs. So they probably just left off all the acronyms, so I can't tell in a glance.
So there are two competing articles that I'm seeing here, or two competing data points, because Google has an AI. I should ask Grok. I trust Grok, the X one, more than I trust Google's AI. But it says, as of August 2022, there are 4 Jesuit cardinals in the College of Cardinals. Michael Czerny, Cardinal Julius Riadi Darmityaja from Jakarta, Cardinal Luis Ladara, and Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich are all Jesuits. But just down below that, it says there are 9, but that's December 2024. So that there are 9 Jesuits. Half of the new cardinals are from religious orders.
Helen Grace says, Joe, wow, Canada, we are your neighbors. But I'll remind you, Helen Grace, you invaded us in 1812 and burnt our White House down. So if we're a little bitter and jaded, I might just take that into consideration.
I mean, didn't we invade a little earlier than that when we tried to take Montreal, though?
Jake, who asked you?
Just saying.
Don't begrudge Americans having a little bit of fun.
Despite
Trump's a little excessive annexation talk.
Despite my jingoistic flag waving every Independence Day, I always like to be the George III contrarian here in the room when these American things come up.
But we didn't burn their White House down, did we? Okay, then. Thank you.
I can look back on history and say the American Revolution's motivations were dubious, but at the same time, I can go look at the United Kingdom and go, boy, am I glad we're independent of that. Right? Now.
Exactly, yeah. God brings good out of everything.
By the way, I also don't want all of Canada. So, you can keep Ontario.
Yeah, no,
enjoy.
I'll joke about annexation and Governor Trudeau, or Governor Castro is what I'll usually just jokingly call the guy. But I don't want, a dozen new blue states. Thank you very much. Because that's what would happen.
Yes.
And then come back being independent because they're the most sensible people there.
Right. Yeah.
A dozen new blue states means the United States permanently becomes a democratic country.
Yep.
The big D Democratic Party. It's over, game over. The Republic dies within a generation because unbridled lunacy rules.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, Canada, are you a part of the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom? I mean,
I just saw Manitoba just is pushing forward again on trying to have "God Save the King" sung in schools, which they haven't been doing.
All I'm saying is make a decision and go with it. Let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. If you're
got to return to the red ensign. Got to return to the red ensign with the Union Jack in the corner.
Great again. That's what I say.
Yep, embrace it.
Praise be to God. Christ is King, says Stephen S. Yea and amen. Viva Cristo Rey. William Jones says, I wanted to live in Yellowknife when I was young for some random and inscrutable reason. There's parts of Canada that I would really love to visit someday. Banff being among them, the Yukon. I would just absolutely love to spend some time up there. Looks so incredible and beautiful. The Canadian Rockies just are amazing. I've never been to that. Never spent any time in that part, but someday Calgary. Oh man, I'd love to go someday. Who knows? God's will be done. But once we make it a state, then I don't have to worry about passports and borders. I just gotta go there. So we're hoping the best. Anyway, Dr. Stine, you were going to say real quick.
Oh no, I'll save it for I'll save it for later. It's not. It wasn't related to the topic, man. Just
for the after show. Bet you guys didn't know about the after show. Yeah.
Think about Lent and the fact that Francis will either be in the hospital during Lent, or there will be a conclave during Lent, or both. and start thinking about your Lent appropriately. Even if he makes it out of the hospital and he's in recovery, out in Casa Santa Marta, think about your Lent appropriately. I have said a lot of really harsh things about Francis, and I'm not going to surrender doing that if he makes a recovery. But charity demands that we remember that the first thing the church is concerned with is salvation of souls, including your own and his.
God love you.